Again, welcome to everyone who's joined us today for this session of the AgrAbility webinar series. My name is Paul Jones. I'm the manager of the National AgrAbility Project, and our topic today is going to be the collaboration between ARPIL, which is the Association of Programs for Rural Independent Living, and AgrAbility. We've had a collaborative relationship for many years, but during the past year, we've entered into a more formal arrangement, so we'll be talking about that. Some of you may be familiar with independent living, some with AgrAbility, and perhaps some are not familiar with either group, but we will be discussing the missions of both and how we're collaborating together. Our main presenter today is Sierra Royster. She is a staff member at the Association of Programs for Rural Independent Living, and I'll be introducing her in just a minute. First, I'd like to give you just a few basic webinar instructions. As you hopefully know, audio is available either through your computer or through your phone. You can adjust your sound settings through the Communicate menu at the top left of your screen. We also have closed captions, and those are available through the multimedia viewer. There are options on the multimedia viewer for adjusting the size of the caption. So if you go to the little drop-down menu on the top right and click on Settings, you can choose things like caption size and caption color. You can expand or contract any of the different options on your right column. You can also expand or contract the entire right column either by dragging on the boundary between it and the presentation window. If you have questions or comments about the presentation, feel free to use the chat option. You should see that on your lower right side. Type your message and then make sure you click the Enter or Send button. And we ask that you send that message to all panelists. That's the option we would prefer that you choose so that we make sure that all of our panelists see that and can get it into the question and answer lineup. If you prefer to ask questions verbally, at the end of the presentation, we'll have a question and answer period. If you have a web microphone or if you have a phone line, you can click on the raise hand icon, and we will do our best to enable your microphone to ask your question verbally. We are going to have 4 quick poll questions at the end, so please stick around for that right before the question and answer period. We are recording this session, and it will be archived on the agrability.org website under the online training link. If you have any problems in terms of technical issues, we ask that you would use the chat window to communicate those, or if you're not able to do that, you can email me, jonesp@purdue.edu. You might want to take note of that email address right now if you'd like to have that on hand. For those that are not familiar with AgrAbility, we are sponsored by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and our focus is on issues of disability in agriculture. Every AgrAbility project is a partnership between a land-grant university and at least one nonprofit disability services organization. Currently, there are 20 state projects around the country. There's also one national AgrAbility project, and that is led by Purdue's Breaking New Ground Resource Center. Currently, our partners on the National AgrAbility Project include Goodwill of the Finger Lakes and ARPIL, who is our main presenter today, and also Colorado State University. If you have any questions or like to find out more about AgrAbility, or you'd like to view any of the more than 60 webinar archives we've got, you can visit the agrability.org website at your leisure. At this point, I'm going to turn things over to Sierra Royster, and she's going to give the main body of our presentation. I will return at the end for our poll questions and also the question and answer period. So I will now make Sierra the presenter.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We're going to talk a little bit about what ARPIL is, a little bit about AgrAbility, and then how do those two organizations, how are we able to come together and improve the quality of life for people with disabilities living in rural America? So to jump right in, what is ARPIL? It's the Associations of Programs for Rural Independent Living. ARPIL is a national grassroots nonprofit membership organization. Our members consist of Centers for Independent Living, the satellites and branch offices, statewide independent living councils, and other organizations and individuals concerned with independent living issues of people with disabilities living in rural America. I'm going to talk a lot more about what Centers for Independent Living are, along with statewide independent living councils. But to give you an idea of some of those other organizations that can join as members, those are Disability Rights, which are protection and advocacy. Some of those are our members. Easter Seals in each of the areas. National councils, so maybe it's the National Council on Developmental Disabilities, maybe it's the National Council on Independent Living. And we also have special interest group. So that may be a council or a mayor's committee that is concerned with a certain area that ARPIL does work within. So some of our members include veterans issues, transportation nonprofits, certain disability groups that are very specific, youth, which is a big main point of ARPIL, and agriculture as well. We also have universities such as the University of Kansas and the University of Montana. They're rural training centers that focus on independent living, our members. So there's just a few ideas of who makes up ARPIL. Our mission as an organization is to provide leadership and resources on rural independent living as a national membership organization dedicated to advancing the rights and responsibilities of people with disabilities living in rural America by serving as a center of resources and by leading systems change. So really we are here to provide national leadership and national voice on rural America, but at the same time providing trainings and resources for all the different organizations that make up the disability community. And our purpose, the main vision of what our organization really tries to do is we try to bring together the different voices of independent living in rural America and make sure that we can have that unified voice as we're speaking out on issues and as we're wanting to see progress made. So moving right along, sorry about that. Okay, so moving right along, we are more than a month. So many people get confused because it is ARPIL, but we do a lot more than just a date on the calendar. Like I mentioned, we are a membership organization, so that is what creates majority of our organization. That's our whole entire body is different organizations. I mentioned some of those just a minute ago. We also provide training and technical assistance. So what that means is we have several different programs on how we do that. We have a peer-to-peer mentoring program that allows a center director or a statewide independent living council director or maybe even a staff member from those organizations to go out to another center or another SILC, as the statewide independent living council is called, to go out and train them on a certain issue. That could be finance, that could be a new program, growing a new programming, sustaining a new program, maybe even training staff. One of the things that we would like to see going forward is maybe even an AgrAbility peer-to-peer mentoring as well. We offer webinars and teleconferences through our training mechanism as well. Some of those include, we just actually wrapped up our youth advocacy training, and that was talking about how to be a systems change agent, how to advocate for yourself on different levels, and then we also expand that to different topical trainings on youth matters as well, where we have run the gamut of everything that you can imagine, from how to make sure that we are cross-disability friendly and how we serve different groups, but also all the way to how to curate curriculum to really be able to move a program ahead. And we also have been doing independent living conversations. We call them IL conversations. And those are being held on any topic as well. And we try to have a presenter come in speak for a little bit on a topic, and then we open it up for conversation. One thing about April is that we are all about building relationships and building conversations. And so anything that we do, we always try to open a conversation for people to be involved. So that's one way that we do that. We also hold an annual conference. So for our organization, April is in October every year, which is kind of confusing. But every year we have an annual conference. This year it's going to be in Spokane, Washington. It will be October 20th through the 23rd. And we typically have our conference from Saturday to Monday, and then that Friday before we have our pre-conference. But then we also have a youth conference. One thing about April is that we have youth at every level of our organization. And so one way that we do that through our conference is we open it up to let the youth have a day where they have planned and they run the whole entire event. And then once the main conference comes, they are embedded in a part of the whole entire conference, ensuring that they are included in every portion of it. We also provide leadership opportunities. Some of those leadership opportunities are our board of directors. We make sure we have certain seats for statewide independent living councils, and we also have certain seats for young people. Again, we always want to make sure that young people are a part of the conversation so we can continue the movement forward. We also have a national committee for advocacy. We have a general committee, but then we have subcommittees that break out of that. So some of those issues that really need a little bit more focus, such as transportation in rural areas. That's always a hot button topic, and that's one of the main concerns of April. That's one of the main things that we started at when we started our organization. We also have breakout subcommittees of housing. We've had one a couple of years ago on AgrAbility and how we can ensure that the agricultural community is included in what we're doing in the IO world. Some of the other things we have done are we have partnerships. So we have, of course, AgrAbility. Some of our other partners include the rural training centers for independent living, the ones especially in Kansas, at the University of Kansas and the University of Montana. They're actually how we got our start. They gave us our initial funding to get off the ground and moving when we first became an organization. So we still continue that work with them. We also provide a national rural voice on issues. So we sit on different committees. Our director, Billy Altum, he is on every committee you can imagine locally in Little Rock, Arkansas, but also nationally. He's always in D.C. making sure that youth and people with disabilities are at the table and a part of the conversations, whether it's transportation, housing, community accessibility, employment, youth, veterans, or policies, and even AgrAbility. So we always make sure that we are on top of and engaged in all conversations. Some of the things get kind of confusing about what April is and what certain centers for independent living are, so hopefully I can clear these up a little bit. April as an organization does not provide direct service. We are able to provide resources and those trainings, but the direct service happens at the Centers for Independent Living level. That's where a consumer can walk in and receive different services and work on different goals that they have set for themselves. As April, we do not do that. We support them in how to do that, though. We also do not have a location for training and meetings. So April is a little small nonprofit in Little Rock, Arkansas. We actually only have two offices there. It's our executive director's office and our director of operations and conference coordinator. And besides that, we are spread out across the country. I'm in North Carolina, and then another coworker is in Missoula, Montana. So we cover different parts of the country. We also do not oversee, supervise, manage, tell them what to do, whatever you want to put in that place. We don't do that as well. Centers for Independent Living are independent. They make their own policies and procedures, and they also decide how they're going to carry out services and programs in their local area. And that also goes for statewide independent living councils. They also manage their own selves, and they write their own plan of how they're going to carry out what they do. We definitely provide trainings for both of those entities, and we also work, again, going back to our trainings, our peer-to-peer program, but we do not give them the rules or any of those types of things. That does not come from us. We're here to support. And then some of the misconceptions about centers for independent living, they are not residential facilities. So centers do not house consumers. They do not have beds or have overnight stays and that sort of thing. They are a place where people drop in or set appointments or come to a program and they learn a skill. They may work on a goal that they have, or they may come and volunteer. So that's what a center is. It's not a residential facility. Sometimes that gets misconstrued. Independent living programs and centers are not a day treatment. So there's not a drop-in adult care, babysitter, daycare. It's been called all sorts of different things. That's not our role either. We believe that people should be contributing members of society and the community, and however they see that they fit into that, we want to support them and work with them to encourage that. So that's where we are not some of those things, but we do so much more. So let's just keep moving on. So here I have a map for you guys. That map is of our membership. So first you'll see in Little Rock, Arkansas, we have our home base, our home office, which is April. And then you'll see some orange stars across this map, and that is our board members that are part of our organization that make up and kind of oversee what we do. And then all those red little dots in different states, you'll see those are our April members. Of course, this is, I think it's from 2015, so we only update this map every so often, but this is pretty much the same. I mean, once we have members somewhere, they usually continuously come back. But some of those members you'll see spread out across in some of the territories in Alaska and Hawaii and all those such places. We do have a few spots that are tannish, I guess, not white, but a cream color. Those are where we do not have April membership. So if you're a part of there, please ask us how you can get involved. I know some of those states are actually AgrAbility partners as well, so we will work together. And then I also provided a link here. You'll see in the black area, that link is directly to our website, and that is where you can go to a link there. It says membership data, and that will pull up an Excel sheet, and it will list all of our members and where they're from, what their center's name is, and that way you can go and you can really see your local center. Is it a member? Are they a part of this? One thing that I do want to just make a point of, if somebody's not a member, it doesn't mean we don't work with them. We can work with whoever wants to work with us. So if it is a center that's not necessarily part of our organization as a member, but as a part of AgrAbility, or is interested in something that is going on in the independent living world, or a question about the disability community, we still will definitely work with them, and we're still open to that. So this is just who makes up April. So that's just a resource for you guys. All right, going ahead. So this helps a little bit to talk about what is a center for independent living. As we talk about centers, they're a community-based, cross-disability nonprofit organization. They're designed and operated by people with disabilities. Centers are unique in that they operate according to strict philosophy of consumer control, wherein people with all types of disabilities directly govern and staff the organization. So a little bit about that. We are cross-disability. So any type of limitation, and when I say any, I mean any type of limitation. And I say that again because sometimes people go, well, this group probably can't be a part of them. If there's a limitation in any major life activity, they're considered a part of the disability community to a center, and they can receive services. And also going to a center does not require documentation. We actually cannot have medical documentation that verifies that there is an individual with a disability. We ask that they self-disclose, and sometimes self-disclosing means that I can't get around as much because my knee is really sore all the time and I'm having, to sit more often. Well, that's a major, interruption in your daily life, and so that is considered a disability. So they are eligible for services at the center. So important note about centers, they make up what their community needs are. So whatever the community need is, that's where their services and programs are targeted around. So when you go from one center to the next, they all offer the same service, but how they carry that service out and what kind of programs that they use for those services are going to vary, because it's really based on what the community need is and what the voice of the different people in the community have asked for. Another important fact about centers is I said that they were consumer controlled. For a center, that means that 51% of their board of directors and 51% of their management is also people with disabilities of any type, again, because it's cross-disability. So that ensures that people with disabilities are always in the lead of what is going on and how services and programs are run and how the organization is being carried out. So that's just really important. I'm going to breeze through their services because I'm actually going to go into that a little bit more in depth in a minute. They have peer mentoring and support, information and referral, individual and systems advocacy, independent living skills training, transition, and transition is a three-pronged piece. It's diversions from institutions, transitions from institutions, and youth transitions. And roughly there's about 403 centers for independent living in the United States and about 330 branch offices. So that's the satellite center, or they are so rural that they have to maybe start the same organization but a branch of that in another area. About 143-ish of those centers are ARPIL members. So they do make up a majority of our organization. Okay, and actually really quick before we go forward, this picture is of one of the centers in Colorado who has an accessible gardening program that they do there. I'm going to hit on that in a little bit of an opportunity for you guys, but that's an actual picture from their program. Okay, so I was going to talk a little bit more about the programs that centers have. I'll get a little bit more into this in a minute, but we actually did a survey with AgrAbility and ARPIL, and we sent it out to the Centers for Independent Living and asked them, how are you involved with AgrAbility? Have you heard of it? Do you know of what it is? Do you have consumers that are involved with AgrAbility? And then one of the things we asked was, what kind of services have centers been able to provide to individuals that are involved with agriculture as a business or maybe even as a hobby? So information referral is exactly what it sounds like, information, and then if they can't offer it or maybe somebody can also assist in that, they refer them to a new organization or place that can assist them. So as you see, information referral is high. Almost every single person that comes in receives information or referral, and that's because there's probably new information that they can always receive. Independent living skills training. So this is really an opportunity for classes, or if there's a certain area that lots of people have been asking for, they offer that service as through a program. They maybe even do it on a one-on-one place. Some of those examples of what independent living services could be is Living Well with a Disability, which is a curriculum of making sure you're eating healthy, making sure you're managing your medications, how to succeed in living independently and making sure you're living well at the same time. So that's a whole series that some centers offer. Some have computer training classes. Some offer reading services. So there's a run of the gamut of how many services that can fall into independent living services. When you're talking about young people, that could be a driver's ed course. That could be how to start a budget, how to manage your budget. And then even when you're talking about all consumers, you know, whatever their goal is, so if their goal is employment, what does that look like on a skill-based level? Does that mean that they need to work on a resume? Does that mean that they need interview skills? Those types of things. So all of these things fall into that independent living skills training. I'm going to come back to the graph in a minute, but I'll continue telling you a little bit more about some of our services. Peer mentoring and support. So the philosophy of centers and where we started was that a person with a disability knows themselves and their disability and their limitation and their strengths the best. And so they are the best ones to ask when saying, how do you do this, or how can I do this? Having another individual with a disability be able to provide that feedback for someone and build a relationship as peers. So One of those things that how that can work with AgrAbility is a lot of centers don't necessarily understand the farm and the language and the culture and some of the limitations that surround that. So within that, that could be a really great place for a client of AgrAbility to work with the center and say, let me provide that mentorship for maybe somebody that's a newly injured individual, maybe somebody that has the same disability, or maybe somebody that has the same profession, such as agriculture, and working within that. So there's a lot of opportunity that maybe a client from AgrAbility can really hone in on that. And sometimes you can learn the if I can get it out, tricks and tips from somebody in those same shoes a little bit easier than somebody that hasn't been in those same shoes. So then we have individual and systems advocacy. So that's another service that is provided. Sorry, my headset keeps falling off. That is another service that is provided for individuals at a center. Individually, that could look as if they're wanting to get assistance in how to get equipment for something that they may need, or if they're not understanding something that has been sent in the mail as far as Social Security or their medical expenses or something along those lines, and they need some assistance on a one-on-one place for advocacy. That's where a center can come in and help out. And then when you're talking about systems advocacy, having to educate a whole system on an issue. So is it an issue that people are being turned away constantly from an organization that will not provide equipment or funding or services that are supposed to? And so having that opportunity to have somebody come in and work at a systems change level. That can also mean going out into the community to maybe a business that is a rural business that provides products or material for somebody that is on a farm or a ranch or gardening, and they don't have access to that. So is there an inaccessible tractor supply where somebody can't get to part of the store that they need to get to? Is there a step out the back dock where they need to get to the tractors that they have out there or the different trailers that they have? Those types of things are where a center can come in and assist somebody on educating them on what is accessibility, how they can make things more accessible, and giving them those resources and really working on an individual's behalf and the disability community's behalf. Transition. So again, that's that three-pronged piece. A young person wanting to transition to start their own farm or maybe taking over the family business. That's where a youth transition can take place. Transitioning from an institution. So institutions are considered any place that you do not have the choice on your daily items, such as maybe you pick out your own food or your own clothes or what time you go to bed, those types of things. So we categorize that as a hospital, long-term care facility, nursing home, prison, jail. It goes on and on. So if somebody is transitioning from one of those entities into the community after an injury, maybe they need help how to get out of that institution. And so that's where a center can really come in. Or if somebody gets injured on the farm and they just do not see how they can receive services at home anymore, and it looks like they're going to have to move into a nursing home or a long-term care facility if they're having issues with their disability and it looks like they won't be able to receive anything at home, that's where a center can step in and help with the diversion of it from an institution to make sure that they can receive those home and community-based services where they choose. So I wanted to point out what those services are and how you could really impact those services when we start talking about what centers offer and how AgrAbility and staff and clientele can work within the system. But I also want you to notice on this map that information referrals at the highest, but peer mentoring and support is one of the lowest. And if you look at the other numbers, there are not a lot of services that are being provided there. And you'll see a little bit better in a minute that they don't really offer, they don't work with a lot of people within the agricultural community right now. So those numbers even get lower when you start looking at the overall. But that's where we can really hit home and start working with centers a little bit more closely. And also in the information referral, everybody's receiving that, but are they all receiving referrals, or can they start receiving more information? And that's where AgrAbility can really step in and say, hey, have you heard about us? Do you know about this information? How can we help you get some more referrals in that might fit your services? So sometimes it's just about all who you know and how you can have that conversation. So going to the next one. What is a silk? So silks are the statewide independent living councils, and with that, they are required, each state and U.S. territory, is required to maintain a statewide independent living council. They're made up with state entities and centers for independent living staff usually, and individuals with disabilities. Those individuals with disabilities that are not related to centers or to a state organization make up the majority of a statewide independent living council. And so this is an organization that really looks at the whole state as a council, of people that look at the whole state and see what are the gaps in the services that are being provided, or the policies or programs that are being provided to individuals with disabilities across the state. And then they come together and they write a plan. This plan is called a State Plan for Independent Living. A SPIL is what we like to call it because we like lots of acronyms. But it's a 3-year plan, and over those 3 years they develop goals and they talk about who has been underserved or unserved in the community. So they usually have quarterly meetings. Some states have nonprofits. Some states do not. They're just a council in some of those other states. It just varies by state or territory. There are about 56 statewide independent living councils, and about 32-ish of those are ARPIL members. So now that you've learned a little bit more about ARPIL, why did we decide to see a natural connection with AgrAbility? We're really from the same culture. A lot of the farm culture things that we see really are independent living culture as well. Some of the farm culture items are solid family values. They're hardworking, commitment to community. We make sure we provide for the community by whether it's the, animals or meat or flowers or whatever that is, we provide for our community. A lot of farmers are self-sufficient. So if I see a barrier that I can't figure out how to do myself, I'm going to rig something up and create access to what I need by myself. We take care of each other. So farmers often, they'll look out for each other, the neighboring farm or the other person in the community. And everyone contributes. So everyone in the family has to take a part on the farm. And whether that is a young person assisting their parent with a disability to access something on the farm that they may not be able to, or lifting them up into a certain area, everyone has to do something to keep a farm up and going. When we talk about independent living culture, and that's what makes organizations that surround the independent living a little different. It's not just your regular old nonprofit. It's made up of a culture and a philosophy and a history. The independent living IL is, as it's seen by the advocates that make it, is a philosophy, a way of looking at disability in society, and a worldwide movement of people with disabilities working for self-determination, self-respect, and equal opportunities. So some of those pieces I just mentioned about farm culture, when we start talking about independent living culture, they really want to work through the barriers that they face with their disability. So when we start talking about that self-sufficiency piece, that's where people with disabilities also see, okay, how I've got this curb here, how can I get rid of it to make sure that I can access the place in the community I need to get to as well. Values of community participation. So not only farmers often are contributing, they often want to be a participant in the community. They are a vital part of the community as well. So people with disabilities want that same opportunity in the independent living world. We want to be involved, we want to be engaged, and we want to be active participating member of the community as well. Many people with disabilities want to learn how to be in control. So how to be that self-sufficient. So like I was saying about a farmer that can't access something, they'll figure out a way to get to what they need. The disability world's just the same. When you start talking about independent living, they're going to start figuring out, if I've got a wheel that just isn't working, how can I rig this up to make sure that I don't have to buy another one right now, and how can I keep moving it and not slow me up for the day? Or how can I rig a door handle open so I can just pull on it rather than having to always really take time to twist it open? Really kind of figuring those little tricks out. They take care of each other. So independent living, we make up, the majority of the centers and the silks are made up of people with disabilities. We make sure that when there's another person with a disability, we are making change, and we are teaching them how to be independent and how to really live with their disability. And then a little piece about lifespan model and independent living model. So when we start talking about independent living, it's very different than the medical model. We don't need to be fixed. We don't need our disability to disappear. We understand it's a part of us. We accept that, and we figure out how to move forward with it. How do we still conquer what we need to every day and get past those daily barriers with our disability, living with it and understanding that? So I want you guys to remember some of these things because we're not far off. It's different organizations, but really when we start talking about their cultures, they're very similar. Okay, going to slide 14, I'm going to kind of go through this a little bit quicker because Paul covered some of this right at the intro. So AgrAbility. AgrAbility began in 1991. We talked about it's a USDA cooperative state research and education extension service, now called NIFTA. This was a 1990 Farm Bill. It was actually funded in 1991. So Paul mentioned earlier there were 8 funded state and regional AgrAbility projects. Now there are 20, and those that were previously funded are now affiliate projects. So one national AgrAbility project actually supports the state and regional AgrAbility projects. The mission behind AgrAbility is to enhance quality of life for farmers, ranchers, and other agricultural workers with disabilities. They do this through education and assistance. AgrAbility helps to eliminate, or at least try to minimize, obstacles that block success in production, agriculture, and agriculture-related occupations. So this has always helped me. This is a chart kind of understand how the funding world works. So we start with a national project. To make up a state project, you have the land-grant university, and you have at least one disability service program that's a nonprofit, and those together make up the state project, which makes up the AgrAbility. So they all kind of work within each other. So some of those disability service programs, you guys may actually know about the centers because they may be a partner or could have been a partner in the past. So Centers for Independent Living can be and has been, and currently some of the partners still are centers for the AgrAbility project. So that just is a quick visual for me that helps how it all flows. Some of the things that AgrAbility does and does not do. They do support the state and regional AgrAbility projects. They provide training and resources and consultations with the National AgrAbility Program Specialist. They provide direct service to customers in states without the AgrAbility project. So some of those states that maybe were previously funded or that have not been funded before, you can still receive services from AgrAbility to learn more about those trainings and resources that were mentioned before. Some of the things they do not do. They do not provide funding. They do not provide the equipment. A lot of those can be done through the Tech Act project partners, which provide certain assistive technology, and most of the funding for assistive technology comes through the state vocational rehabilitation system. So connecting you with those important partners is very imperative, and that's kind of one of the pieces that AgrAbility really can assist with. Other resources of grants and loans are also available, so those are some of those pieces that when we're talking about resources that AgrAbility can really help out with. And then some of those states have a lending library at assisted technology or a reuse program where somebody has used a certain item and maybe doesn't need it anymore, and then somebody else can exchange that. So those are great opportunities for a lot of clients. So this is a map of whose AgrAbility state and regional partners and programs are. The yellow states are the ones that are actually funded, and then the affiliate states are the light gray, and the dark grays are the ones with no projects. But just like ARPIL AgrAbility, if you have a question, and no matter if you are an actually state or that is funded or not, they still will provide services and information to you. And that's where we really hope to kind of educate centers and silks to continue being knowledgeable about the different resources that are available in those states, especially the ones that are not funded. But the ones that are funded, we want to get you guys connected, especially to each other. Okay, so we have been partners informally for quite a while, and formalizing this partnership about a year ago, we came up with these different items. Increase awareness level of both the National AgrAbility Program and ARPIL staff members regarding the respective services of both programs and how to access them. So you'll see that this is not a checked item. And the reason that this is not a checked item is because this can never be completed. We are always going to have to learn more about each other each year. Programs will develop, new projects will come about, and we want to make sure that that cross-educating piece always continues to happen. So that is something that we're working towards, and this is one of the ways that we're doing it through these webinars. Increase the resources available to each ARPIL member, so the Centers for Independent Living and AgrAbility funded and affiliated states on centers and silks as resources. So that cross-pollinating of information and connecting each other to those different resources that are available. The thing that we have been able to do is ARPIL has conducted an assessment of their membership clientele to determine the level of services being provided to AgrAbility clientele. So that graph that I showed you earlier, the vertical chart, that was some of the information that came from that survey from the centers. So we're going to talk, the next slide will have a little bit more about some of those graphs and where are some of those gaps that we were able to identify on how we can do that. So we also want to enhance the collaboration between the state AgrAbility projects and the rural centers for independent living. We want to connect those people that are funded to their centers for independent living, because AgrAbility can do so much, but there's still areas that need help with those clientele that maybe AgrAbility does not cover. And that's where a center can come in and help with some of those resources, maybe some of those trainings, maybe some of those connections and networking in the community to get them what they need at home where they prefer to be. So that's where we want to continue that education piece for centers to learn about AgrAbility, AgrAbility to learn about centers continuously. And one of the big things that we want to do is work together to increase collaboration with youth in the Centers for Independent Living and state AgrAbility projects. So one of the services that are required by Centers for Independent Living is that transition service of youth in transition. We want to figure out how we can get those young people in those programs at the centers, how we can make sure that if they choose to be involved with the agricultural community, that they know that they have access and they know they have resources to be able to allow that. Some of the things when we're talking about youth, we want to talk about, youth that have maybe a parent that is working on the farm that does have a disability, and how that youth can better assist in a safe way, but also know that they have resources as well that they can reach out to. And then youth that want to be involved with the agricultural community clubs, programs, those types of things, the 4-H's, the FFAs, all of those different things. We want to make sure that youth know that they have a place there, whether they have a disability or not, and that they have resources if that's a career that they want to pursue. Also, we want to let youth know that programs and facilities have to be accessible. So when we start talking about, going to shows or going to different businesses that provide resources and material to the agricultural community, youth with disabilities need to know that they have the right to be able to access those places as well. Those are vital areas that sometimes young people don't know that they have those rights, and we need to make sure that they're educated and know that is a place that they have the right to be and the right place to be involved. So that's something that AgrAbility and April want to do together. Okay, on this page there's a lot of charts, I know, which is really funny because I'm not a real big chart person. But when I started seeing these numbers from the survey that we did, there were some big things that jumped out at me. And I made the graphs really small just because the visual of the different colors to me really stuck out. But the things that I want you guys to notice when you're looking at them is the first graph to the left. We asked how Centers for Independent Living are defining their population that they serve. So are they serving mostly urban and suburban areas? Are they serving a mix of urban, suburban, rural areas? Or are they mostly rural? And you'll see the green, which is the highest bar, 48%, 48.6. I think, let me pull out my note here. Yeah, 48.6% of those were mostly rural. So, and then if you look at the other side, the 40.5% were a mixture of urban, suburban, and rural. So there's so many centers that are serving rural areas. April has never defined rural as a number. We let people define that for themselves. But how we define it as an organization is rural is not being able to access services. So if that means you are 10 minutes past a bus stop that you cannot walk to and that there is no other service that comes out to you, then you are now considered rural because you're cut off from those services that are provided to so many. So it really, then you go out to where you have a 50-acre farm and there's no transportation out there and you're really cut off from a lot of services that are provided in those urban areas sometimes. So it really varies. But I think it's important to note a lot of centers are identifying as rural. And when you're going to talk to a center and when you're going in to have that conversation of what centers can do, know that they are identifying rural. One of the other questions, the second chart, which is the first pie graph to the left, we asked, have you heard of AgrAbility? So 78% of these people that were surveyed said, yes, I have heard of AgrAbility. When you go to the next pie chart, we asked, do you know if you have a funded AgrAbility project in your state? 43% of those people said, I don't know. This, to me, was a big glaring piece of they may have heard the name. They may know a little bit about AgrAbility. That's something with farmers and people with disabilities. That's all I know. But they don't know if they even have a funded state project. Some do. You have those other people in the orange right there that say they are affiliated project. I think that was 14%. And then you have yes, we do have one, and then no. But I think, to me, the glaring piece of that was the 43% that said, I don't know. That is where we can see that we really need to partner. We need to educate each other, AgrAbility and Centers for Independent Living, on what AgrAbility is. Not just to know the name, but know if you have a state-funded project. And if you don't, what are your resources? And if you do, what are your resources? The last chart to the right of the screen, this takes me back to the one that I showed a little bit ago about the services. We asked how many consumers were involved in agriculture that they served. And the tall one was the purple chart shows 1 to 10 people, and that was the majority, is 1 to 10 people were served. And then 11 to 25, 27% of centers were serving 11 to 25 people, and then 22% were serving 26 or more. That's a really low number when we start talking about how many people are out there that need services. We showed you what services were being provided, but this is the part that I wanted you to look at to see this is really where we need to start working with centers and AgrAbility together. There's so many people out there that need those services that centers can provide, that maybe the farmer can actually help with, like the peer mentoring and support that I mentioned earlier, can provide some of those resources. And AgrAbility is a ton of resources. The state projects are a ton of resources. And so if we can connect those two, we can start serving so many more people and getting them the services they need, but also the skills that they need, the advocacy that they need, and reaching goals that they may have. So those are just some of the glaring pieces that I wanted to point out to you guys. So with the year one, we have done some cross connections. So we have been able to work together with centers in AgrAbility. We are also getting ready to put on a training for California Centers for Independent Living and other organizations out there to let them know about an intake form that will kind of help educate their center staff on what questions would be helpful when somebody comes into a center. Also making sure they have the resources of the AgrAbility Toolkit, which is linked in here, and then the overview of the programs and how to collaborate, kind of some of the things that we've covered here. We are also linking AgrAbility staff who know the language of agriculture and the language of vocational rehabilitation to assist farmers in getting that technology that works best for them in states that might not be funded with AgrAbility. We've also reached out to centers for independent living that have an accessible gardening program to reach out to their AgrAbility projects, either the affiliated one or the funded one, so that they can make sure some of those consumers are getting their needs met with both organizations. And we also have started a conversation with youth and how we can get programs to collaborate within a center. If they have a youth program and if they have an AgrAbility program, how can they work together, and how to do some outreach. We're doing some groundwork with 4-H right now. And then assess all the members of APRIL on what services are being provided. I'm going to kind of speed through these, but I've listed them here so you can go back and use them as a resource. When you're talking to your silks, read your state independent living plan. So that's the plan that the council makes up. Does it have unserved or underserved populations? That's where we can reach farmers, and that's where you can go to your silk and say, have you addressed this? When you're looking at the council and who makes up the council, is there anybody that represents the AgrAbility or agricultural community represented on the council? Can you ask, put an application in if you're interested into that? How can you do outreach to make sure that they know who to reach out to when they start talking about unserved or underserved populations? Do they know of the organizations or the people that can connect them to farmers or ranchers? And have you contacted your state AgrAbility person to see if they can represent as an ex officio? So silks can also reach out and say, hey, AgrAbility, would you like to be an ex officio member of our council to make sure that your voice is heard on our issues? And then is there an agricultural university department in one of the universities in your state that maybe wants to get involved with what the council is doing? And that way when the next 3-year plan comes around, we can have a voice at the table and make sure that we're maybe as a goal on one of those plans. Centers, how can centers and work, how can we increase the access there? Do some research. See what the county extension agency offers. The assistive technology offices. Is there AgrAbility in your state? Google it. Go onto AgrAbility's website and check it out, and they have the contact information if you do have an affiliated project or a funded project. How can you do outreach to farmers and ranchers and anybody else in the agricultural community? Who can provide agricultural training in your area? So if you don't know how to best serve the individuals walking into your center, how can you find somebody that can provide your staff with those trainings? Is it AgrAbility? Is it somebody else? Is it maybe the county extension office? Who are those people that maybe can provide that? And look at your intake forms for centers. Is there a part that you are making sure you ask the right questions to know how to serve those farmers and ranchers that may need assistance? Understanding that farm culture and making sure that's part of that intake form is very valuable. Identify your services that can improve or grow for farmers and ranchers. So taking a self-assessment and looking at what programs that you offer and how you can really make sure that farmers and ranchers are included into that. And then AgrAbility, so those that work within AgrAbility, reach out to your centers and silks. The only way that we can give them the training that we ask for them to have is by providing that training, letting them know about the businesses and the communities that are out there. Assist in creating some language for intake forms to assist IL specialists in working with farmers and or ranchers. What areas could you get in the disability services from a Center for Independent Living? So where could AgrAbility staff receive training on different disability groups? And do you have a client that maybe would be perfect for peer support for another farmer or rancher or another person with that same disability that maybe you could link up with? And then read your state plan for independent living. Know what services are being provided or goals that are being set in there, and is the agricultural community a part of that? And this is just a big chart. It's kind of hard to read, but where are the gaps? So we asked, what other things that people could learn? What are the things that centers need to learn? A resource library. So the toolkit they've put together, AgrAbility has a wonderful toolkit online that is a wonderful resource library. Now we just need to educate centers and silks on that, where that's at and how they can access that. Access to web-related information to disability issues in agriculture. So how can we make some of that research that has been done, how can we make sure that the centers are also knowing about it but also being trained on it? Individual consultations related to specific consumers. So how can we, when an individual walks in, how can we make sure that we're able to holistically work with that consumer? Meeting with AgrAbility staff. So they want to meet, so let's make those connections. You know, go on the website and find your local center and call them up and say, hey, let's meet and talk about what each other is doing and how we can work together. How to serve veterans that have disabilities that are interested in farming. They're coming across these veterans and sometimes centers do not know how to access that or help them. That's where AgrAbility, again, can come in so great to help with that process. Information on assistive technology for agricultural workers with disabilities. So that goes back to the slide I just mentioned with reaching out to your assistive technology department and figuring out, or office, to figure out what has been provided and how they can continue that. And then a path to services, so a step-by-step of when somebody walks in, how do we serve them to the time that they are ready to walk out with those goals met that they have set. And that one of those first things might be an intake form and looking that over. So there was lots of different things that they mentioned. So I encourage you to reach out to your center and find what areas they are needing assistance in. And that pretty much ends my presentation. So I hope that was not too much information overload, but I think there's a lot of areas that we can really start to connect with one another.
Well, thank you very much, Sierra, for giving us an overview of many things related to AgrAbility and Centers for Independent Living. We will welcome your questions, and if you would like to ask a question, again, you can type that in the chat space. Make sure you hit the submit or send button. Also, if you would like to ask your question verbally, you can raise your hand using the raised hand icon. We do have some poll questions I'd like to do before we start the question and answer. If you could please give us your feedback, that would be helpful to us in planning future webinars. So our first poll question just asks about your professional affiliation. You may have multiple hats that you wear, but please pick the best one that's most appropriate for you. You need to click on the radio button next to the answer and then make sure you hit submit again so that that is actually recorded. One other request, if you have multiple people viewing at your computer, if you could let us know in the chat window, that would be helpful so that we can more accurately record our attendance. Our next anticipated webinar is going to relate to technology for people with visual impairments. And we anticipate that will be in the early part of September. We will plan to let you know. since you have been part of this webinar. I'm going to close that poll in just a few seconds. If you could make sure you submit your answers. And I believe you can see the results there. I need to open the next poll. This asks about the information that was presented today. Did you find it to be valuable, and did it meet your expectations? Again, if you could give us your feedback, we'd appreciate that. And a few more seconds on that poll. Looks like it's going to make me wait till the timer runs out, so we've got a few more seconds if you haven't completed that yet. Okay. And the poll results there for you. Save those results. Our next question asks about the technology today. If you could let us know if it was effective and usable for you today, we'd appreciate that. Also, if you did have any specific problems, if you could let us know in the chat window, that would be helpful for us in troubleshooting issues for the future. Again, a few more seconds for that. And I'll close the poll. Looks like people got along pretty well overall. And our final poll question. Based on today's session, would you attend another session in this series? For those of you who might be interested, if you have not heard yet, our AgrAbility National Training Workshop has been set for next March in Portland, Maine. So if you would like to go to the agrability.org website, there's more information about the hotel space that we're looking at and the dates, specific dates for that workshop. So again, that's available at agrability.org along with many more resources. And I will close the poll here and show the results. Okay. At this point, I'm going to turn things over to Sean Ehlers, who's assisting with our technical aspects of the presentation. I need to find you on the list. There you are. Sean's going to be leading our question and answer period.
Okay. So I'm guessing I'm just going to go ahead and jump into this first question. Can any organization join APRIL? Yes. Any organization that cares about disabilities and cares about rural issues is more than welcome to join. us at ARPIL. And then how about individuals? Yes, we do have individual membership as well. And then who appoints members of the silks? So the applicants, each silk varies a little bit in their process of membership, but the person that appoints is the governor's office for each state. And how can a Center for Independent Living get training about collaborating with AgrAbility? So that's something that you guys can reach out to me at ARPIL, and we can kind of connect you guys. Or I would encourage AgrAbility to, either stop by a Center for Independent Living or give them a call or email them and say, hey, can we provide you a little bit of training on what we do, and can you provide us a little training on what you do, and do a little cross-training on that. But if you need some assistance with that, feel free to give me a call, and we can connect you with helping with that process. And one more thought about that with collaborating, I encourage you to look back at that the slideshow, and when you're talking to them, instead of just learning just general information about the center, which is also very valuable about how they're carrying out those services, as I mentioned, look at those bullet points that I added of specific examples of where AgrAbility can help out and then where centers can help out. Because I think if sometimes you can make the conversation a little bit more specific, it can go a little bit further than just general information.
Okay, thank you again, Sierra, and we appreciate everyone's attendance today. Again, we have recorded the session. Sierra's contact information is available on the screen. We'll leave that up for a few minutes in case you'd like to copy that down and contact Sierra about any of the issues that were raised today. Also, again, feel free to contact us at agrability.org. Again, we'll be inviting you to our upcoming webinar, which is scheduled for September. And with that, we will wish you a good day.